Finally, some friends of theirs, a couple months in, say, hey, man, that ain't your kid. I'm a little worried. Maybe you should get a test. They get a test. They find out, yeah, it's not their kid.
Oh,
this mother carried the baby to term.
Crazy.
It's not even like it was a mix-up at the hospital.
Our first topic today is...
It's a real doozy.
It's a topic that's close to my heart. I've been thinking about it a lot because I think it's one of those complex modern day topics that are, because of technology, it kind of complicates the things that we have to consider. And I know a lot of people have personal stories attached to this topic too, so which muddies it up a little bit with emotion and stuff like that. But the first thing that we want to talk about is, should Christians support IVF? And it's kind of been in the news and, around the election and all of that stuff. But, we have a clip from Michael Knowles that I think he did a great job at just breaking down why he believes that it's immoral. And I think it's the best job that I've heard. But he also breaks down, which is, a really good depiction of some of the shortcomings of something like this. And when humans start to enact our will and kind of play God, is we tend to make some mistakes. And so let's just jump into that video. But he has a personal story, or a story of people's personal experiences of something that happened in regards to IVF that I think really paints a picture here.
I have just read the most disturbing story I've read in many weeks, and it's a really excellent piece of journalism that I encourage all of you to read, and this is going to be the most shocking part. It was in the New York Times. Now, actually, it was in the New York Times Magazine, just has a little bit more serious journalism to it, but this was really, really good. Credit where credit's due. Headline: an IVF mix-up, a shocking discovery, and an unbearable choice. 2 couples in California discovered they were raising each other's genetic children. Should they switch the girls? By Susan Dominus. Really encourage you to go read this.
Okay, so that is not
I'll give you the Cliff
typical
notes.
Question
Part it was in
around IVF.
Yeah.
Typically the question is like, should you even do this thing? But there's a whole new angle that
This is crazy.
That you never even considered.
Yeah, the fact of
all the problems that come downstream of making babies this way. Oof.
Yeah.
All right.
We're a little further along, babe.
California discovered they were the girls by Susan Dominus. Really encourage you to go read this. I'll give you the Cliff's Notes. There's a couple. They went through in vitro fertilization. That is to say, they went to the baby store. They procured this procedure. They had scientists create human embryos, create bait persons in a petri dish. Then typically most of those persons are frozen away or killed, just destroyed. But one of them implanted and took, and they gave birth to this baby. And immediately the father says, wait a second, that baby doesn't look like me. It doesn't look like either of us. That baby actually looks part Asian. Neither of the parents were Asian. So he had these fears. Oh, yikes, what if the IVF clinic made a mistake? The wife didn't want to hear about it. She seemed to have some fears too. Finally, some friends of theirs, a couple months in, say, hey, man, that ain't your kid. I'm a little worried. Maybe you should get a test. They get a test. They find out, yeah, it's not their kid. This mother carried the baby to term.
Crazy.
It's not even like it was a mix-up at the hospital. This woman carried.
But that kind of is my question. But isn't it your kid?
No.
It's not that easy.
Well, he goes on to kind of break it down more, because it's like, you've been raising this baby for so long.
You carry it and you raise it. Isn't it your kid?
Genetically, no.
You gave birth to that baby.
Yeah.
It was in you and it came out of you. Isn't that your kid?
The things we have to deal with these days, huh?
All right, play the clip.
Their genetic child. They call the IVF doctor. Like, first they call a lawyer, then they call the IVF doctor. They say, hey, we think this happened. They find out happened to another couple. Now, at this point, they say, where's our kid? Was our kid destroyed in the lab? IVF companies destroy human embryos, kill babies. Was our kid destroyed? Was our kid lost? That happens. Was our kid given to someone else on the other side of the world? They find out there is a match. Their child was given to another couple, and the child is 10 minutes down the street. But you got to remember, there's two women here have brought these babies to term for 9 months. These mothers are the only mothers these children have ever known. They've swaddled them, they've cuddled with them, they've fed them, they've nursed them, they've done all the things, but they're not really their babies. So they find out, okay, these are the wrong kids. I'll get into the actual writing of this piece now. 10 minutes later, a babysitter arrived to watch the baby, while Alexander and Daphne, the parents, took Olivia, their 5-year-old daughter, to see Frozen 2, a long-promised outing. In the theater, they sat on either side of her, tears running down their cheeks in the dark, trying to understand what this news meant for their family. If the clinic had given them another couple's embryo, what did that suggest about the fate of their own embryos? If they tried to find out and inform the clinic of their error, could they end up losing May? Even if they did nothing, could they lose May to her genetic parents who might already be desperately trying to find her? So the couples finally meet up. They're crying, they're sobbing, they're absolutely miserable. They decide to switch the babies. But then what about the 5-year-old sibling? Daphne explained to her 5-year-old daughter, Olivia, that there was another baby who was a part of their family and that she was gaining a sister after a bit of a mix-up. Daphne said nothing about the switch, but Olivia was quick to figure it out. Wait, did this mean they were losing May? The father responded, no, he assured her, we'll always have her. But Daphne groaned internally. That
the wisdom of children.
Yeah.
The wisdom of children. That little girl knew. That little girl knew that was their baby. Like, at this point.
Right.
And I think, honestly, I think actually that this does get to the heart, the kind of heart and the kind of mind that the people who undergo this procedure, like the place of mind that you have to be in, of like, I'm going to create my perfect designer baby. I know I'm way oversimplifying it, and I know, sorry, I want to take that back because I don't want to be offensive. The heart of adoption, do you know what I mean? That would have, in a certain sense, circumvented this anyway. Like, that is the heart of adoption of that little girl. Like, that's our baby. We loved that baby. You brought that baby to term. You gave birth to that baby. And as a 1-year-old, like, I have a 1-year-old. If that little baby is close to 1 year old, like, that's your baby.
Yeah.
That baby knows. That baby knows who its mama and papa is. My 1-year-old certainly knows.
Yeah.
You know?
If she just ended up with some other parents, even if genetically.
Totally. And so to say, like, whoopsie, actually, that's my baby because it has my DNA. I think the heart of adoption, you know what I mean? It's just messed up.
Well, yeah, this is a whole nother layer of the complexity. And I think the thing that I kind of see here is, I wrote down a note of like the kind of nature of what happens here is like, you can go to like a moral IVF facility. And
I have some neighbors who did that. That was their story. And
explain what that means.
It means, so what happens is you have the eggs and you have the male zygote and you put them in a petri dish. And quite often, because I guess because it's not a sure procedure, you do it a bunch of times, which means that you create a bunch of embryos. And as he was describing, what do you do with all these embryos? Like, the parents only want one.
So a moral facility only does it one at a time.
So what the facility did is you have to sign a contract. They created 8 embryos for this couple. And you sign a contract that says, I will come back for all 8.
Oh,
now,
wow.
The 8 of them, there's like stage 1 where you put it in the petri dish. Does it actually create an embryo? Stage 2, when you put it in the mother, does the embryo stick to the lining and actually grow to term? And so what they agreed to do is they would go for 4 rounds and put them in 2 at a time. So if both of them take, then you could have twins. If neither of them take, then neither of them take.
And then you go and get the other ones.
And you sign a contract that says you must come back for all 8 embryos.
So if all 8 work, then you have 8 kids.
But at least for their first round, just the one. They just had one little girl. And so my guess is probably that's that's the odds. They're probably
Yes.
signing up for approximately 4 kids on average.
But I know at some places, and this is where it gets, I think, into this weird dystopian kind of like, I feel like we find ourselves that a lot right now in the world with Neuralink and all of that. And I know I get crazy about robotics and stuff, but in some places you can quote unquote choose the eye color, choose
Because you
hair
can do
color.
genetic testing on all those embryos you made and
Yes.
pick.
But the way that it's kind of communicated is that, hey, you're just choosing. So whenever I first heard about this, I was younger, and I thought, oh, that's crazy. They're using CRISPR, where they change the genetics out.
edit
but
genes,
that's
yeah.
not what they're doing. All they're doing is testing all of these babies, embryos, and then you're choosing which one lives, basically,
Yeah.
which is terrifying. Let's continue.
Wasn't true. It would be an awful promise to break. At the same time, she knew that in that moment, it seemed like the only possible answer to lie to her. Not say, yeah, actually, you're losing your sister that you've come to love over these past 11 months.
Yeah, 11
Alexander
That's
told
wild.
Olivia not to be scared, but Olivia started shutting down. She made a small whimpering noise. Yeah, she was losing her sister. She asked again, were they going to give her sister away? As Daphne tried to comfort Olivia, she burned with anger at the clinic. Somewhere along the way, a mistake had been made. That's true. And there's plenty of reason to blame the clinic, but it's not only to blame the clinic. Because this couple chose to do this. They chose to do this thing for all the right reasons, for all the good intentions, for all the pain of infertility. They chose to do this thing that led them to this point. And here's the kicker. They hired a lawyer, and the lawyer said that he had personally encountered upwards of 10 cases of switched embryos in IVF. He had personally represented 1,000 plaintiffs accusing clinics of misconduct or negligence, usually involving loss, damage, and killing of embryos.
Yep.
And this lawyer believes that the public becomes aware of only a fraction of the errors that occur in fertility clinic labs. What happens to this couple, these two couples? What does this mean for how we think about IVF? We'll talk about that in a moment. Right now, go to expressvpn.com/Michael Knowles Show. Using the
over
internet with
ExpressVPN.
And it's like using your
Oh, thanks.
just one accidental.
No, you
Okay,
gotta
Every
go
time you connect
way
to an
forward,
unencrypted
but-
network, cafes, hotels, airports, you are essentially laying out a welcome mat for hackers to
Where it
access your
says most
personal info.
replayed. Okay.
Even 6 months of
Okay, pause it.
ExpressVPN for free. Crazy.
Oh gosh. I feel like that's the whole thing about the dystopianness of it, is that you once you begin from the outset, the fact that you didn't ask any questions, you know what I mean? It's like you always knew that if we were going to have this kind of technology, it needed to be in the hands of sensitive, intelligent, morally guided people. And the fact that you blew through all of that and just started doing it, the fact that we ended up here where there's so many moral uh-ohs and oopsies and I forgots and problems does not surprise me in the slightest. Because you already started for the cha-ching to make these moral decisions, Well, okay, I shouldn't say, obviously the parents are not making that. I'm sure that parents were begging for some way to deal with their problems of infertility.
Well, and a lot of people, it's such a complicated issue because the terminology and the understanding of what is even happening is so caped in all of this marketing language. And so you have people walking into things that you don't even in the life termination.
Yep.
We can't say specific words on here, but in that debate, and not in the debate, but in the procedures that typically happen, why people end up doing that is because they don't believe that is a human.
Totally. And I mean, exactly when you're saying the terminology, I wish we could have brought up as well J.D. Vance on Joe Rogan. And I was very disappointed in him because he was talking about women's healthcare debate that we're having in this country, even though that's not what it is at all. It's
Yeah.
not healthcare. He said it's a balance between autonomy and the value of life. And I was so mad at him, especially because he's a Catholic, because that is not at all what the argument is about. And again, this is not an argument over infertility versus science versus, whatever. Like, it's the entire debate central is around what is a person.
Yeah.
When is a person worth saving? And Christians believe at conception. And after that, conversation over.
Yeah.
All those embryos that you created in that science experiment, they're people. Conversation over.
Well, we're just approaching a time where it seems like technology is advancing beyond our moral capabilities.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that happened in, 1940 whatever when we dropped those bombs.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Too late. Yeah. Anyway.
So right here, so we can continue with this video because I think what he does after this,
The way he explains it.
he explains and lays out in the best way that I've heard. And
Sure.
because I've had a hard time explaining this, I've had a hard time thinking through this. It's been something I have a lot of emotional attachment to. And so it's hard for me to actually convey it in a way that is fully logical. Instead of just getting upset about this topic.
Michael Knowles then.
And so let's see what he says here about IVF.
Story from New York Times Magazine. 2 couples, their kids, they go through IVF. They accidentally implant the wrong kids. They're raising the wrong kids. They find out they have the wrong kids. Now they have to decide, do we give up our kid that we've been raising for 11 months? Do we tell our other daughter that she's going to lose her sister? Sorry, bye. Whoopsie daisy. Oops. A little mistake. Or do we keep the kids? It's kind of like kidnapping. What about the rights of people to their own genetic children? What happens? What happens? The story concludes with these people's lives ruined, basically. They have an impossible choice. They have to either give away the kid that they've gestated and have been raising and has become part of their family. Just give the kid away. Whoops, never mind. To take their genetic child, or they have to abandon their genetic child, their actual progeny, their biological progeny, and just let that kid be raised by someone else without any influence over how that kid's going to be raised. Impossible choice.
Wild too.
Neither of those are good options. So for now, what they say they're doing is they're just going to raise the kid together. So the resolution to this is they're going to live in a weird kind of platonic polycule. And we'll see how long that lasts. This has been tried before because these kinds of errors, IVF companies implanting the wrong embryos, sometimes creating the wrong embryos from the sperm from one father and the egg from a mother that don't know each other. Oopsie daisy, whoops. It happens in corporations. It happens in commerce sometimes. People just make mistakes. And usually you make a mistake and it means that the hem of your dress is a little bit off. But in this case, you make a mistake and a human being was created that you never intended to create who now doesn't really have a claim to any parents. But oops, that's business, isn't it? It's just how it works in corporations. There's going to be some margin of error. You want to be efficient. You want to reduce the error, but sometimes it happens. And in this case, you give babies away to the wrong parents, or you create babies who don't really have a claim
Pause it again.
to parents.
We're doing this mostly for the sake of not getting demonetized. Man, that is crazy. He's completely right about it being an impossible choice. Because on one hand, what you're saying is so true. Is like, how do you give away? It's like my sister. Like are you giving away my sister?
Bro, they were. I don't care how you spin it.
But then what's the alternative? How do you do you just like you said, you just let someone else raise your biological kid?
It's impossible.
Yeah, it's like it shouldn't exist. It's like what it reminds me of is the days of Noah, where it says like God could not imagine. Like God's probably looking at us and being like,
It's like we should have figured these things out in science fiction stories, not in real life.
Or like you said, adoption's a good You shared with me the other day when we were discussing about doing this topic. You know, people who have went through something similar and really debated whether they should do IVF or not. And these are believers. And do you want to talk about the conclusion that they came to and what ended up happening?
I think, well, okay, so I know several couples, who have gone through this. One of them, at least, it was strictly monetary. It was just like all this infertility, and they were struggling, and there was another couple in their lives, and they were doing it too, and then they did IVF, and it was like, yeah, we just can't drop $30,000 to make a designer baby, and it was kind of, I think that was part of it, but it was also moral, like, what happens to all those babies that we make? Those are our kids too. And for you to just freeze them or destroy them or whatever it is, And so uniquely, that one couple who partnered with the very specific company who did strictly moral, you have to sign the contract where you come back for all the kids. That's the only people that I've ever heard do something like that. So it is, and that's kind of where you would think to yourself, okay, you thought through this. You know what I mean? You actually thought through how to ensure that this gets done in a moral, thoughtful way. So it's not, I hesitate to say like all IVF is bad. I hesitate to say that it's an immoral procedure. You know what I mean? I think that it is more the outlook on children that you go into with it, because it's the same thing. Like, we can have nuclear fission reactors that provide clean power. That's great. You can also make nuclear fission bombs that destroy people in unfathomable ways. So it has more to do with the heart towards kids that you go into it with. And I think that that's my beef with the parents who trade away their 11-month-old. Of like, you just showed me what your heart towards kids, not your kid, but kids in general is when you decided to do that. That to me is like, I don't know what I would do. It's like, it's easy for me to criticize you from where I'm sitting, but still.
And you mentioned one story to me about how it was like they were highly considering it, and they actually just prayed.
Oh, well, okay. No, if you're watching this, you go find this video and scroll down into the comment section, and it's in the comment section of this video. All these people, and their story is, we were struggling with infertility. It hurt so bad, but we prayed, and God finally gave us a kid. Or we finally gave up, and we decided we were not going to go through IVF. 1 month later, we got a kid. All these stories, 8 or 9 stories that I was reading in this comment section. And so we have a whole nother video about this, but in the Bible, the curse on Eve is, you will have toil around the subject of conception. And it's not pain in childbirth, the biological process of childbirth, but it's around getting pregnant. The curse is that Eve will have toil around getting pregnant. And so there's this whole, in the Bible, in chapter 3 of the Bible, is part of the pain of the fall is struggling with infertility and wanting to be pregnant and not being able to get pregnant. You just read the book of Genesis, and that's all over it, But the solution then is to turn to God for his blessing, and leave it in his hands. It's not to take it into your own hands.
Yeah, that's one of the most famous stories of that is Abraham.
Yeah,
and Sarai.
Exactly. And then in the next generation, Rebecca can't get pregnant. It's just a little. It's like 2 verses just hidden in there, but it's the same thing. Isaac and Rebecca are married for 20 years, and Rebecca doesn't get pregnant. And Isaac prays for her, and she gets pregnant.
Do you think this is like a, we always talk about and kind of how the Bible Project does, where it's like everything leads back to Genesis, Genesis 3 specifically.
Oh, it's all in there.
And that's the dynamic is this a, forbidden fruit kind of decision, like where it's like, I'm going to take it into my own hands?
So, okay, I was just listening to the Bible Project today, so that's fresh on my brain, where the knowledge of good and evil is something that you need to operate in the world. The problem with the tree is not that God does not want to keep the knowledge of good and evil from you, because that's how you morally navigate in the world. He just wants you to listen to him when it comes to the knowledge of good and evil, instead of reaching out and taking it for yourself. And so again, I don't think that the procedure itself is a moral evil. But when you say, like, I need a baby and I'm going to figure out how to get a baby on my own, and you reach for IVF without thinking it through, without thinking through the implications, without thinking through what's going to happen to those embryos, without caring, you know what I mean? You're actually not caring about the children. You're caring about yourself and the empty hole in your heart that infertility has caused. And I get it. Personally, in my personal life, I get it. But that is the forbidden fruit, is that thing, that need where you reach and you say, I can't wait on God. I can't wait to listen to God. I need it.
That's so interesting, because you're making me think of like all of these different technologies or things that can take place in creation. I'm thinking even things like witchcraft, or
that's another big one right at the top of the list,
or even life extension technology and stuff like that. It seems like maybe, and this is just a idea, is that there is a way for all of these the things that are gained by that, for all of that to be done in a godly way. I'm not saying witchcraft done in a godly way, but I'm saying like the way that they use occultic or demonic things to alter reality and alter creation in order to do something with it. Like there is a godly gift of the supernatural that God wants to give you. Yeah. And maybe that doesn't take place in this age. Maybe it's when we're given resurrected bodies and stuff like that. But there seems to be a timing, and it's like your kids, like when kids get trust funds, like right when they turn 18, they don't have the moral, lots of times they don't have, and I've seen this a lot, they don't have the moral judgment in order to handle that right, and they ended up becoming drug addicts a lot of times and waste all the finances, and because they don't have the capacity to do it.
Yeah.
And maybe some of the things that we're after, even like, I don't want to say space travel is necessarily in this, but there's this thing where it's like, we must get to Mars in order to sustain humanity. And so
hey, Michael.
So we don't, anyway, you want to jump back into the video? Might as well. Did you speed it up? I didn't. Okay, press play.
Let's miss the point.
Here he breaks it down.
Is simply morally unacceptable. It's simple as that. I get why people do IVF. I know many people listening to this show right now have done IVF. I sympathize as to why you did it. My wife and I experienced infertility for 2 years. I know it's just awful. I know. I see how tempting it is. I was tempted myself. It's simply morally unacceptable. And it's morally unacceptable for some of the reasons that people hear, that it leads to the killing of many babies because it leads to the destruction or permanent freezing of embryos. Indefinite freezing of embryos. Nothing's permanent. They'll be killed eventually, most likely. But also because it commoditizes human life, and it establishes the domination of science and technology over the origin and destiny of human life, because it denies the legitimate rights of children to be the product of a specific conjugal act of his parents, his mother and father, who are bound together in a permanent union, and because it exerts an undue demand over the future destiny of individual human beings and of humanity writ large. It's just morally unacceptable. There is no moral case for it. The only person who can be said to have rights in reproduction are children who have the rights to their parents, to be the specific conjugal act of their parents in holy matrimony. Or even unholy, even in civil matrimony. But that's the right. No one has a right to a child.
That's what I'm saying. Is in all that you did, in all that those parents did in that specific story, it was not about the kid. They did not love their child. They loved their idea of a child, of being able to have a child. But they didn't actually love that specific child. I have a 1-year-old, and to rip an 11-month-old kid from a parent that it knows, it recognizes that's its mom and dad, to rip, you did some real damage to that kid, I'm sure.
At the very least, it's reckless. Like, on behalf, like, I personally, like, put more blame on the clinics than even the parents, because I think it's similar to how, like, teachers of the Bible are judged to a harsher extent. If you are making your business off of marketing to people, hey, you can't have a baby? Well, come on in. We're going to help you have a baby. It's going to be great. And all of it's shrined under this, like, deceptive language. I think that is not to say people that decide to do that without thinking through it or looking into the details, there's no blame on them whatsoever. But I think the fact that he talked about this attorney that has dealt with 10 cases personally of this happened, switch embryos, like, that's just nuts. To think that it's happening that much is wild.
Okay, let's take it. Let's not say embryos.
Yeah.
Let's say toddlers.
Okay.
If you had a daycare that 10 times had sent home the wrong toddler, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That place would be shut down. It would be gone. Everyone would be fired. Lose your job, lose your license, done. And the fact that like, for them, because it's an embryo, it's not a problem. And it's all shrouded in scientism.
Yeah.
That's messed up. That's whack.
Yeah.
Super whack.
So what is your synopsis on should Christians support IVF? Is this a complex conversation, or is it as simple as Michael Knowles is putting it, that it's morally unacceptable?
There's so many feelings. That's the thing is, when you read in Genesis that was the toil, that was a curse placed on the woman. That is, it's like that's word
part
toil,
of the circumstances we're in.
That word toil is tied up in, like, anxiety. It's tied up in depression. It's tied up in meaninglessness. It's the deepest angst and frustration of life.
Yeah.
Is tied up in infertility and having kids. So it's even deeper than to say you're feeling it. It's just your feelings. Like, no, it's deeper than your feelings. And yet, you just got to consider, like, am I doing this because I have a hole in my heart? Yeah. But do I actually love these babies that are going to be made or be frozen or die? Who is this actually about? Is it about loving the kids, or is it about me and my need for a kid? And then on the flip side, again, like, if I would say to somebody, why don't you just pray? And then again, all the angst and the depression and the anger flare up. I have prayed. Believe me, been there, okay? I have been praying. God hasn't given it, blah, blah, blah. And again, now on the flip side, not about loving the kid, but like that basic mistrust, distrust, bitterness towards God about your infertility. Like that is a much bigger thing to conquer than filling that hole in your heart. And I will say, in my personal testimony, when my wife and I conquered that bitterness towards God himself about our situation of infertility is when, same story as all those people in the comments, we received healing and had another baby. So could it be, and I know what toes I'm stepping on, but could it be like God is trying to get your attention and deal with your attitude towards him? And even if you do deal with your attitudes toward him and you still don't get a baby, but you've actually solved the deeper issue of your attitude towards God and your trust in him or lack of trust in him.
That seems to be very valuable.
You know what I mean? And so you could bypass all of that. You could never have to trust God again and just go straight to science. In the same way that people, like we were talking before the show, you could never trust God again, get a nice job, have lots of money, and never trust God again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There are so many scenarios that you could just live your life and never have to trust God. But God will orchestrate tests in your life that cause you to face it. Do I actually trust him? And I think that infertility is one of the most fundamental ones that God will use.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I think I don't know why we do this, but we so naturally try to avoid, like, I think most people in general within America at least is like, I'm just looking to have a good life, you know?
Yeah.
I'm just looking to be comfortable, enjoy. And a lot of times through that, and me included, and probably you included, it's like we don't want to face trials.
No.
We don't want to face things that make us uncomfortable or sad or go through these, honestly, these like really painful times in life, whether that's someone passing away or going through infertility or whatever else you're going through. But a lot of times those are the things that it seems like God is using to grow us up and to mature us. And when we avoid it, sometimes we stay like grown children sometimes. And we may have everything everyone says you should have, but we don't have the character and we don't have the wisdom and stuff like that. And so I want to mention on here, because she sent me a message, but my mom did say you can mention adoption. So
yeah,
adoption is an option as well. There's a lot of kids that need to be adopted.
And again, that's like, who do you actually love?
Yeah.
Do you want to love a child, or is the child the hole in your heart that you need to fill? Like, is it about you and your perfect life of having a child? Again, I'm being passionate and I'm trying not to intentionally offend, but seriously, is it about your perfect life of being able to have a child and that picture of yourself with your own child? Or is it about actually being able to love someone other than yourself? Because if it was actually about loving someone, there are lots of babies out there who need to be loved. And so to discount them, you just got to ask that question, is like, who's really at the center of this need?
That's often the thing we have to ask ourselves in a lot of, I was having this conversation today, just about, sometimes even the way parents raise their kids. A lot of the times it's for themselves.
Yup.
It's for.
Don't even get me started.
You have something to say on that, or?
Oh man, I was just thinking the other day about.
Do you ever wrestle with that, or?
No.
Okay.
Well, because I love the Lord. I mean, I already laid all that down.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking the other day about spanking.
Okay.
And you know what I hear from moms, not from dads, but from moms? Oh, I could never spank my child. It's not about you.
Oh, yeah. It's about them.
This was the thing. My child was like 1.5, and they were acting a fool. And I remember clear as day. It was like just this clear thought came into my head. And I remember thinking, I love you too much to not spank you. The Bible says I must drive foolishness out with a rod. I'm going to do it.
We're having the same conversation at Thanksgiving.
But that's the thing. What I hear mostly from women is, I could never spank my child. It is not about you.
Okay, I have a question. Is this on the spanking thing? I know we're way off. Is it anecdotal evidence to be like, I was spanked and I turned out all right? Like, is that just anecdotal evidence? It seems like most people that were spanked by actual loving parents are, when they're adults, they're like, yeah, I'm glad I was spanked. Like, the vast majority. Now, some people were legitimately abused as kids, which is absolutely wrong.
But I think not ever correcting your child is also abuse.
Yeah.
Like, it's negligence to never correct, to never discipline, to never. Yeah, now we're way off. I got lots of thoughts on spanking, but anyway, the central point of what we're trying to say about this is, like, who do you actually love when you're going through this? What is it about you, or is it actually about the kid? Because especially in this scenario, is it about you or is it about the kid?
Yeah.
Who do you love in this moment? And that will shape the decisions that you make.
I think that's any really moral problem. It's like, what is the actual motivation of this? Is it for yourself, or is it for the highest good of other people and of what, like, God's moral objectiveness, Yeah. Like,
and I think that that's what the Bible means when it says God's kingdom.
Yeah. And that's the problem, is like most people have taken God out of the equation entirely. So it's no question that you end up in moral subjectivity land and with no sense of up.
Yep.
Because you need an outside source to determine what's true. That's where morality starts.